Okay, what's up, what's up, what's up? We're going to talk a little bit about Act 5. So I want to look at a couple scenes in Act 5 and do what we would call a close reading, looking at some of the specifics in the scene to get a sense of how Shakespeare concludes the main story arcs for our two main characters, Lady Macbeth, who we'll start with, and then Macbeth. So if you haven't read Act 5 yet, don't proceed. Make sure you can finish the reading and actively learn before you head over here. Just thinking about Lady Macbeth a little bit, when she first shows up on the scene here in Act 1, the literal scene, we are maybe a little bit surprised by the kind of character that she is. Now, you'll recall in her Act 1 scene, I want to say it's scene 4 soliloquy, she asks these dark spirits to unsex me here, and ultimately, again, asks that her milk be transferred out for gall. In this way, what Lady Macbeth is asking for is a real separation within her own humanity, and she desires to be separated from her femininity, any kind of softness. But if you read back that soliloquy, which we talked about at length, you'll see that a lot of what she's being asked to talk about, to be removed from, is not merely things that are associated with women, but are things that are just associated with people. She has to be taken away from a sense of her guilt or a sense of like any hesitation that would keep her from doing this monstrous thing of murdering the king here, murdering Duncan. And so this separation from her femininity is also a separation from her humanity, which in both cases, we could say, kind of seems to connect her with the Weird Sisters, these people who seem to have human attributes and yet are clearly removed from normal concerns of what it means to be a human being. She takes this on in comparison to her husband, who she says is too full of the milk of human kindness. So she desires that he wouldn't be so innocent and that she instead would be swapped out with this bitterness, right? That life-giving, nurturing quality taken away, given a kind of bitterness that would allow her to enact this violence, which is exactly what we see her do in Act 2. If you recall, in Act 2, a couple moments of softness from her during the murder of Duncan. For instance, she says, "If he had not resembled my father when he'd slept, I'd have done it." Right? Speaking about killing Duncan, if he didn't look a little bit like her dad, it's kind of a sweet moment from Lady Macbeth. But ultimately, when Macbeth comes back and his hands are covered in blood, and he's like, "Think about it, I dare not. I can't even look at it." Like, there's no like way that he's going to go back with the daggers that he has in his hands, right? Lady Macbeth says, "Infirm of purpose," takes the daggers, goes and does her thing, does her thing, comes back and says, my hands are of your color, but I shame to wear a heart so white." And then a little later, she says, "A little water clears us of this deed." And then she says, "How easy is it then?" Right? Unlike Macbeth, who says, "Will all great Neptune's ocean wash clean this hand?" And then he says that his rather would make the green one red. Right? That if he took his bloody hand into an ocean and dipped his hand in the ocean, he wouldn't draw away a clean hand. He would instead watch the ocean itself be made bloody as a result of his action. Lady Macbeth here says, "What are you talking about? It's really easy. You just wash your hands, right? Wash your hands and you're done. How easy is it then, right?" All superficial. All this sense of if there's any kind of guilt here, it's all on the surface. You wash your hands and you're not guilty anymore, right? In Act 3, prior to the banquet scene, Macbeth comes to her. He's acting weird. He says his mind is full of scorpions, right? He says he's planning to kill Banquo. But he cuts her out of it and doesn't include her in the conversation. She, though, prior to this, is doing the same kinds of stuff that she did in Act 1, trying to encourage him, trying to get him to stop thinking about this. At one point, she says a very, it's a line that we say all the time: "What's done is done." Here in Act 3, Scene 2. I think it's Act 3, Scene 2. You can fact check me, and I'd encourage you to. "What's done is done," she says, and she is trying to encourage Macbeth. But of course, ultimately, by the banquet scene, she ends up being in this kind of demeaning role of covering for him. It's one thing to do that privately, which she's always done. She's always been trying to work him up privately and encourage him and support him privately. But now that it's public, right, now that this breakthrough is happening in front of everybody, it does seem a little bit more embarrassing. It seems like she's now being asked to do something that would put her in this space of submission, a space that you would almost see her as being playing second fiddle to Macbeth, right? Well, Macbeth is the king, but in their gender dynamic, where so far it seems like Lady Macbeth has been the more aggressive and powerful one, and he's been the weaker one who's playing support to her vision. Now that is starting to get a little rockier in Act 3. And at the end of Act 3, Macbeth pushes her out. He cuts her off. He cuts her off from his council. She's in the dark about Banquo, right? Not involved in the murder of Banquo. I'll just say in B's death. And he is now going to look primarily to the Weird Sisters. He doesn't include her in his confidences anymore, right? He goes to the Weird Sisters, which he does at the start of Act 4. By the time we get into Act 4, there is no Lady Macbeth. She doesn't have a single line in Act 4. She's not on the stage at all. It's also the smallest role for Macbeth, but Lady Macbeth doesn't even appear on the stage. She's not even referenced. Right? There's no mention of her at all. So by the time we get to Act 5, we're looking at a very different Lady Macbeth, and that's what we'll do now.